Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
This is Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio, perhaps the most powerful and influential AM radio station in the country. Well, folks, I was mugged this week. Yes, mugged once again by the fake news. You see, back in March, I attended a Catholic event at Mar-a-Lago. It was a Catholic Prayer for Trump event that was hosted by a group called Catholics for Catholics, put together by a terrific young man, John Yee. Jack Posobiec spoke, of the senior editor of Human Events. Steve Friend, the former FBI agent. Arthur Pawlowski, a Christian minister who has been harassed in Poland for his opposition to the COVID-19 vaccination. General Michael Flynn, of course, Tim Ballard, and the most exciting of them all, Jim Caviezel. It was a great event, but before I got the event, outside the event, by the way, it was a ticketed private event for which you needed to buy a ticket and to show your ID. Two relatively inappropriately dressed women who were kind of posing as fangirls approached me to begin asking me questions about politics and the election, and they both expressed their concerns that the election would be stolen. Little did I know that they were surreptitiously videoing me in violation of Florida state law. You see, Florida state law is a state that requires both parties to know and willingly agree to a recording, and the only exception they make is if it is for news. But since these young ladies, a woman by the name of Lauren Windsor, who is describes herself as a progressive documentary filmmaker, the kind of the self-styled James O'Keefe of the left, puts it up on her Twitter site for which she is paid. So she has put it up for profit, and it is illegal. Not that I'm concerned about any of the content. Let's talk about that. I am asked by them, we're concerned about the election. They say, Biden can't win again? And I said, no, it could be stolen again. They say, well, there's got to be something we can do to prevent that. I say, we're working on it. I'm not saying I'm totally confident, but we're getting there. By the way, in 2020, only 63% of evangelicals bothered to vote. By the way, in 2016, that number was 78. So you tell people, oh, you're doing great. I have to worry about overconfidence. That's one of our biggest problems. This Quisling says to me, what are we going to do to stop it? And I say the same thing I said in speeches across the country. We're working on it. It requires lawyers, judges, and technology. Governors, they ask me. I say some, but there are not many with the guts. I will explain that. We go on to say that I am, within the discussion, I say that we will do, my favorite quote, one that they leave out, that we will do everything legally possible to win the election. So now when you look at the way this has been distorted, for example, here's precisely what I say. I say, a woman tries to bait me. She says, well, I was at the Capitol on January 6th, so I'm prepared to go again. Well, I say that may not be necessary. There are technical legal steps that we have to take to try to have a more honest election. We're not there yet, but there are things that can be done. Like what, she says? Changes in state law, real-time voter list monitoring, going to court as we did to challenge some of the voting laws. The election's not tomorrow. For example, we went into court to challenge in Michigan over hand ballots. We should be suing in half a dozen places. By the way, those lawsuits have been subsequently filed. We're finally getting on an offensive footing. Now, it is interesting that they seize, particularly on one section where I'm asked about the tsunami of lawfare, and I say, I think the judge is on the verge of missing the charges against him in Florida. I also say the president's trial in Georgia is falling apart. That's correct. They're delayed in New York City. That trial ultimately happened. And now they're delayed in Washington, D.C., as they have been, pending a Supreme Court decision regarding immunity. Now, if you looked at the fake news media, first of all, you can see that I do nothing other than advocate for using every possible legal and technical tool. My reference to the judges is very, very clear. For example, in Michigan, when the Democrats shut down the counting center at 3:30 in the morning, and the Detroit police physically removed the Republican observers, a lawyer for the Republicans should have been able to file an immediate emergency order with a judge. But the courts being closed, your lawyer needs to know how to reach a judge. The judge can determine the merits of your emergency motion. That is the purpose of my references to judges. And then I go on to say, as I said, that I thought that the charges against Donald Trump in Florida would be dismissed. I turned out to be wrong, by the way. Remember, this was in March. Since then, Trump's lawyers have filed a motion that challenges the legitimacy and the constitutionality they filed a motion to dismiss, which was denied, proving I was wrong. Ergo, I clearly have no inside knowledge beyond the fact that I've read the documents. Anyway, the fury that this causes in the lamestream media is hard to believe. Let me read some of these headlines. Roger Stone reveals insidious plan to help Trump win an election. The New Republic. Roger Stone's secret recording sparks fury. That's Newsweek. Secret recording reveals Roger Stone bragging that he has judges in his pocket for 2024 win. Folks, I clearly did not say that. Trump confident caught on tape talking about Mar-a-Lago judge and the real reason delays matter. By the way, the court criticized Jack Smith for trying to expedite the cases. Donald Trump's delays are called due process. Roger Stone was recorded. A secret recording. Roger Stone spells out plans to challenge 2024 loss of election. The Huffington Post. These are extraordinary because none of them have any real iota of truth. But the most outrageous part of this mug fest is that they're like blackbirds flying off the wire. In other words, Rolling Stone, the Daily Beast, Newsbreakers, UK Daily Mail, Law and Crime, Newsweek, The New Republic, all of them with this totally fake narrative that I somehow said something improper when nothing I said in this illegal video is not what I say in speeches virtually once a week, sometimes more often. Then, of course, you get the media pile-on. Joyce Vance, a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, but also an MSNBC legal analyst. You see, all of these former prosecutors use their credentials to try to give the impression that they are some kind of unbiased observer, some unbiased legal analyst. But she has one of the worst cases of Trump derangement syndrome I've ever seen. She writes a Substack piece, which I will respond to in Substack, saying that I either insinuated or implied some control or relationship with Judge Cannon. And quite clearly, to anyone who will listen to the video or read the entire transcript, I make no such claim. I just read you the two references to judges. It is almost as insane as Andrew Weissman. Now, Andrew Weissman actually says that U.S. Marshals need to be deeply concerned about my significant comments and that they are chilling. He goes on to recycle all of the nonsense that he is responsible for in my life. You see, at 6:06 in the morning when I was arrested, a CNN producer texted my attorney with the indictment that was still sealed. My lawyer didn't even know that I had yet been arrested. And when you looked at the sealed document that she sent, a document that would not be unsealed until 11:30 that morning, it had no timestamps or markings on it. But if you go to the metadata tags, you have the initials of the man who wrote it, Andrew Weissman. This is the same Andrew Weissman who lied to cover up mob murders when he was a USA in Brooklyn. The same Andrew Weissman who knew as general counsel of the FBI that the so-called Steele dossier was a fraud and had been paid for by Hillary Clinton, but allowed it to be used as the rationale for the Mueller probe anyway. This is the same Andrew Weissman who destroyed both Enron and their accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, only to be reversed unanimously by the U.S. Supreme Court and tongue-lashed for prosecutorial misconduct by the judge in that case. This is the Andrew Weissman who talks endlessly about the rule of law, but he's the guy who erased the memories and the cell phones of 31 members of the Mueller investigation task force after the appointment of special counsel John Durham was made, and it became clear that there would be an investigation. He again, this is probably the dirtiest prosecutor in U.S. history. But look at the headline that we get from the Salon. We should pay attention, says Weissman. Experts identify the most chilling part of secret Roger Stone tape. Well, my tape is not secret. It is illegal, is what it is. The folks over at InfoWars, Alex Jones really stepped up. Democrat undercover video of Roger Stone's a nothing burger. Wearing a hidden camera and microphone in the style of James O'Keefe outlet OMG, that's O'Keefe's media company. Windsor, that would be Lauren Windsor, the paid Democratic operative, because we have the records. The political consulting firm she works for gets thousands and thousands of dollars, $25,000, I believe, from the Democratic National Committee or the impeachment company. So she's a paid agent. She's not a progressive leftist. I point out yet again that there's nothing here that matters. I say there are technical legal steps that need to be made to make sure we have a more honest election. Now, when I specifically asked about governors, I say some governors will help, and others won't. That's just a political fact. I also point out that when I'm asked about ballot harvesting, I say it will be harder in some places than others. Let me try to explain that. In some states, ballot harvesting is legal. And in those places, if somebody legally ballot harvests, they can turn them in. In other states, like Florida, it is illegal for a person to touch another person's ballot. That is one of the reforms that we have had. So that explains yet again. So they put up this benign video. I, of course, say, well, this is illegal, and therefore, perhaps I will sue. The left then immediately says, "Oh, well, he's melting down. He's trying. I have nothing to hide, but I do resent being approached at a Catholic event and then I guess at an earlier Turning Point USA event where a second woman whose name is San Marco, I guess she is a Confederate, a co-conspirator, and she specifically is the one that I say that the judge is on the verge of dismissing the Florida charges. Now, here's why they're so hysterical. Judge Cannon has scheduled 3 days, I believe, of hearings into the very legitimate question of whether the appointment of Jack Smith as special counsel is constitutional and legal, and whether the funding of the Smith probe is legal. And while Weissman and Vance and others, Norm Eisen and Neil Keitel and others tried to tell you that this is an absurd theory, it is not. There has been an amicus brief filed at the U.S. Supreme Court by Ed Meese, the former Attorney General of the United States, and two very distinguished law professors who make a very good case that his appointment is unconstitutional. Were Judge Cannon to rule that way and that ruling be upheld, that would dismiss the charges. We're going to talk about that when we come back. If you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio, and we'll be right back.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show. Any place on the globe, by the way, you can listen to us at WABC Radio. We're live streaming. I think it's 173 countries now, so there's no excuse for missing the Sunday show. As I was saying, Judge Eileen Cannon, who the rabid left has been beating on because she is an honest judge who's following the law. She's incompetent. She's unqualified. She's inexperienced. No, she's got a terrific life story. Her family came here from Cuba. She was a respected prosecutor. She has been meticulous about this case. You see, they love judges when the judge belongs to them. So, for example, General Flynn, myself, Paul Manafort, we were all tried by a judge appointed by Barack Obama. We now know from John Durham's final report that the whole Russian collusion hoax was born in Barack Obama's office with him present. But nobody said, oh, how unfair that they are being charged in front of Obama judge. But here it's Eileen Cannon is a Trump appointee. She should step down. They've really tried to do this case extraordinarily in secret, meaning they would like to leave most of it redacted. And that's not really going to work because the judge has been pretty, I would say, aggressive about making sure the American people know what this is really about. So we do see the lawfare has fallen apart in the sense that we await this decision. Now, I'm very familiar with this argument because, and it's quite simple. It is that Jack Smith, like Robert Mueller before him, was never confirmed by the U.S. Senate. There is no law that gives Attorney General Merrick Garland the authority to appoint Smith. Neither is there any allocation to pay for his multi-million-dollar investigation. If he had been a U.S. attorney who had already been confirmed by the Senate, the special counsel appointment would therefore be legal. The judge has scheduled 1 or 2, 3 days of hearings. She's allowing I believe former Attorney General Meese or several law professors, those on both sides of the issue. This is driving the Get Trump brigade of Weissman and Neil Keitel and Norm Eisen and Joyce Vance completely and totally insane. And therefore, I could yet, in what I said in the purloined, or I should say the surreptitiously recorded illegal video that is barely newsworthy, I could yet be right. The charges against Trump could very well be dismissed. But here's this real significance. This is the warm-up for the excoriation, the greater excoriation of Judge Cannon. Just to be clear, I do not know Judge Cannon. I have never met Judge Cannon. I've never been in the same room with Judge Cannon. Those on X who are saying, check their phone calls, I've never communicated with the judge in any way. The only thing we have in common is we both live in the state of Florida. I never said nor implied that Trump or anyone else had the judge under their thumb. You'll find that headline over and over again from all of the fake news media outlets. Yes, I'm going to have to sue. I really have no choice because it's about the principle. The other thing it's about, in all honesty, is money. You see, I'm clickbait. By that, I mean that they have so savaged me, they have so lied about me, they have so distorted what I actually say. What's going on today is Exhibit A, that I'm clickbait. And clickbait means that when people click on these websites, they get paid. And the truth is, Rolling Stone and the Daily Beast and Newsbreakers, Law and Crime, Newsweek, The New Republic, the HuffPo, all of them losing viewers, cutting back, fewer revenues. So if you put anything up that attacks Roger Stone, you're absolutely certain to make money. Also, you can be subjected to the worst death threats on social media, but nothing will happen to those who threaten to kill you or your family. One of the most annoying things is how many Roger Stones there are on Facebook. Folks, I'm not on Facebook. Guy came up to me in a restaurant and wanted to know where the crypto was that I sold him. I didn't sell him any Bitcoin. It was Bitcoin he wanted. I didn't sell him any Bitcoin. Another woman approached me about the job that I had offered her. All of this on Facebook. Folks, don't fall for this. There's even a guy who says that he is buying real estate on Facebook. I am not on Facebook. Don't look for me there. Don't get scammed by those who would take your hard-earned dollars. I hate to be providing big monies for all of these lunatics, but it is indeed Trump derangement syndrome. Joining me today is Jeff Clark, who served at the highest level of the Justice Department. He is fighting for his life and his career because he zealously represented President Donald Trump. We also have Congressman Burleson, who has just introduced legislation that would have the effect of avoiding the subpoenas, yes, of Steve Bannon and of Peter Navarro, also of Mark Meadows. He also joins us today. So it is a jam-packed show. Joe McBride will be joining us to talk about the latest in the January 6th cases and what is going on there. You say another example of the two-tiered justice system. So it's a jam-packed show. Folks, if you haven't downloaded the WABC, the 77 WABC app, really urge you to do so. That way you can go back and listen to the show today if you weren't able to call in on time. Yes, for those who keep texting me, I am working on the cookbook. Yes, I am, my WABC cookbook, and it is coming. 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 It is Anyway, as I say, Jeff Clark, who was appointed by Donald Trump as Assistant Attorney General over two of the Department of Justice's litigating divisions, Harvard and Georgetown educated, currently the Director of Litigation for the Center for Renewing America in Washington, D.C., the very important MAGA think tank. He, like other lawyers who have zealously represented Donald Trump, is fighting for his life. And then the congressman, we're very excited about that. I met Congressman Burleson at the great Turning Point USA conference in Detroit, which was absolutely amazing. It is very heartening to see thousands of young, totally committed conservatives. Charlie Kirk is doing an amazing job. Had a great conversation with him, and I asked him to come on the show today. One of the things I'm curious about is I do know that there is a organization within the House structure. The synonym for it is BLAG, B-L-A-G. I don't recall the official name, but it has 3 members of the majority, 3 members of the minority. It speaks for the House in legal matters. So, for example, in all of those states that sought to remove Donald Trump from the ballot, this organization filed with the court a copy of the January 6th committee report as evidence as to why Trump should be removed. Now, this same body could meet again, and they could revote to essentially negate, to cancel the January 6th committee report, because we now know it was based on lies, that those who conducted it suborned perjury. They tampered with evidence. They doctored videos. Of course, they also destroyed all their records before they closed their doors. So I want to ask the congressman why he has not chosen that route, or perhaps why the speaker has not chosen it, the prospects for his legislation. So for all of that, we will be right back. I'm Roger Stone. If you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. And as the great Jackie Gleason used to say, away we go.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. If you get a chance, go to stonezone.com. You can check out everything I'm doing, including a link to all of my past 77 WABC Roger Stone shows. We've had some great guests, including President Donald Trump himself. Now, when I spoke at the Turning Point USA conference, I buried the hatchet with Steve Bannon. People know that Steve Bannon and I have had our differences, and I'm not going to recount his testimony at my trial and open an old wound. In this particular case, I think Steve Bannon has legitimate constitutional issues regarding his handling of a subpoena from the January 6th committee. Now, I was subpoenaed, and I showed up, filled my legal responsibility. I testified, but I invoked my Fifth Amendment rights, not because I did anything wrong, not because I had anything to hide. No, by the way, I did not meet with the Proud Boys the night before. No, sorry, I was never in any war room at the Willard. There's a huge amount of disinformation out there that passes for fact out there in the internet. But I, in my remarks, recognized that in Bannon's case, the president had sent him a letter specifically invoking the question, the principle of executive privilege. Robert Costello, an extraordinarily able and experienced lawyer, urged Bannon at that time that he did not have to testify, that he shouldn't testify because it would actually be a violation of the law. So it was Bannon declined to testify. Actually tried to work it out with the committee, saying if they wanted to go to court immediately and have the court rule as to whether the executive privilege was in place or not, the Congress wasn't prepared to do that. The committee wasn't prepared to do that. Now, it's going to be very interesting because now that there's a subpoena from the House to Jen Psaki, who's a former press secretary for the current president, Joe Biden, regarding parts of her book, and she is declining to testify on the basis of executive privilege. Then, of course, you have the examples of the Attorney General himself, Merrick Garland. Garland, who insists that he stands for the rule of law, has declined to honor a subpoena from the House of Representatives for the audio of Joe Biden's interview with special counsel Robert Hur. They argue that the Justice Department has put out a transcript, and they're claiming executive privilege. In this case, Garland is actually saying that he is happy to respond to subpoenas, but only those that are legitimate. Well, this is a legitimate subpoena from a legitimate body of government. He says that a disclosure of the the Joe Biden audio tape would destroy the functions of law enforcement. I find the whole thing incredibly ludicrous. In any event, let's go to our guest, Congressman Eric Burleson, a courageous conservative who I met at the Turning Point USA conference, joins us now. Congressman, sorry for making you sit through my diatribe.
An honor to be on.
So, you have sponsored legislation in the House. I'm going to let you characterize it. I characterized what would the effect of it would be, but talk to us about the mechanics of this.
Yeah, this is, that the House, in my opinion, can't leave this chapter of this story unfinished. We need to, for the sake of history and for justice, to repudiate the January 6th committee for what it was, which was a completely biased and illegitimate committee. It was illegitimate because from its very makeup, Pelosi violated the rules when she set forth the members of the committee. She would not allow McCarthy to put any of the Republican members on the committee. And she chose two Republicans that were, that were friendly, including Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. And yet that's still assuming that was the only rule she violated. She still didn't allow McCarthy she didn't add any additional members. The committee was supposed to be composed of 13 members. Instead, because it was so stacked towards Democrats, it was only 9 members. And there was no. Then this other reason why it was illegitimate is there was no ranking member. The rules require that every committee has a ranking member and a minority member that serves as a counter to the chairman. There was no ranking member, and the rules on that committee that govern subpoenas say that a subpoena cannot be submitted without consulting the ranking member of the committee. Well, if there's never was a ranking member, how can you possibly submit a subpoena? And so all of the subpoenas that were submitted from that January 6th committee are completely illegitimate. They should be thrown out. And it's important for us in this Congress to set the record straight and not leave this chapter of history unfinished.
With all due respect, Congressman, I think the actions of the committee are more egregious than that. The only Republicans who were appointed were Trump haters. So in essence, it was a completely partisan inquiry. We know that they tampered with evidence. We know that they suborned perjury. A woman named Cassidy Hutchinson testified under oath, under questioning by Liz Cheney, that President Trump instructed his White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, to call both me and General Michael Flynn on the afternoon or evening of January 5th to, as Liz Cheney helpfully added, find out what was going to happen on the 6th. There were never any such conversations, neither on my part nor I've checked with General Flynn. I've never communicated with Mark Meadows. I met him once when he was a member of Congress in the green room at Fox. I've never had any communications with him at all, not that day or any other day. Hutchison goes on to say, Congressman, that she dissuaded Meadows from attending a meeting at an alleged war room at the Willard Hotel, where I did have a hotel room, but know nothing of a war room, but that he later called Stone and Flynn essentially for a debriefing. Also, a perjurious lie. There's no meeting to be debriefed about, and again, we have never spoken to him. You have the manipulation of the videos. The videos of me that they leaked to CNN have a completely different visual track than the videos they showed in the hearing. I think we got a lot of AI here. They hired a Hollywood producer to put together this made-for-television extravaganza. We hid the witnesses that would have told us the truth. I guess my question is, why hasn't Speaker Johnson appointed a committee to investigate the actions of the January 6th committee?
Well, we do have a committee that is investigating. It's a task force that's being led by House Administration Committee Chairman Barry Loudermilk, and that committee is working to investigate, the January 6th committee and their actions, but no actions have been formally taken as a result from their investigations, and so I think. I'm just a freshman, and I'm frustrated. When I come back home, I sense the frustration from my constituents that we Republicans seem to be feckless in our response to some of they're at the end of the day, Democrats are at war against us, against American patriots like you and like Mr. Bannon and Mr. Meadows, and yet our response is to send strongly worded letters. And so, to me, this is as a freshman, we researched what can we do, and I think that this resolution that I drafted, that we have quite a few co-sponsors for this resolution, does several things. It rescinds the subpoenas. And it sends a mess and asks the speaker to send a message to the attorney general, notifying him that Congress has declared that the committee was illegitimate and that the subpoenas were illegitimate, and therefore that any legal actions against these individuals should be dropped. That's not to say that it's going to force this Justice Department to do so, but at least it would give something to Mr. Bannon and anyone else who might face further prosecution, something that they could take to court with them.
Congressman Eric Burleson, who joins us today, is from Missouri. He served in the U.S. House since 2023. Prior to serving in Congress, Congressman Burleson was a Missouri state representative and then a state senator. He has a 100% conservative rating from national conservative groups like the American Conservative Union, as well as the Club for. He was elected as the first founding chairman of the Conservative Caucus of the House. That's very exciting. During his service in state legislature, he was named as the 2011 Missouri Republican Assembly's Legislator of the Year. He's obviously a man of enormous courage. It has to be frustrating, but I think you put your finger on the problem, and that is the Democrats lock in March step. They are all committed to a socialist vision and agenda. To them, the rules, the law, the facts, the evidence, these things don't matter. Our Republican caucus sadly includes some who are feckless, gutless, weak-kneed, lily-livered, jelly-spined, go along to get along, white wine swilling establishment Republicans who just don't want to fight. at the same time, we have some real heroes, people who are there not because they want to be someone, but because they want to do something for the country. Why do you think the speaker has not used the BLAG? Perhaps you know the actual. That's the acronym. I can't recall the formal name. Maybe you can fill that in for me.
Yeah, I don't remember it perfectly. But it stands for bipartisan legal something.
In any event, this body would have the body to revote, which I think would have the same effect, avoiding those subpoenas, but also then, more importantly, the committee report could never be used in a U.S. court again. But for whatever reason, the speaker seems disinclined to do that.
Yes, and that's one of the strategies in filing this resolution is to. And I'm not trying to be crude or mean, but is to give the speaker courage to take a vote in BLAG. And give him, just draw attention to this topic more. And I think that the more that we draw attention to it, the more the speaker will feel the pressure to act. And I think that he wants to. Sadly, a lot of times members, as you put it very well, Mr. Stone, is that a lot of members, they'll say things like, the institutional folks won't, are not happy with that, or think that would set a bad precedent. And what that's code for is that the staff, that the longtime staff in the building say that disapprove of that strategy. Well, I didn't get elected to get approval from lifetime bureaucrats and to get approval from people in the deep state. I got elected to save America from my district and was sent there to save America. And so it's frustrating to me how many of my colleagues are don't have the same motivation or goals. But I feel like the only way that we're going to move forward is to not allow those members to continue to hide their votes, to have their votes not be taken, and to stay in the swamp. I want to force us to take some of these votes and show the American people. If a member is not going to vote for this resolution, I would hope the speaker would put it on the floor anyway and make the members take a vote so they can go back and if your district is supporting, that's fine. That's fine. But my district wants to see us, do something about this weaponization of government.
Well, there are two ways to skin a cat, whether your legislation were to pass, although the chances of it, I guess it would have a direct effect on the House. I'm not a lawyer, as I often say here on the show. Let me ask you about this. The House Oversight Committee, and also your colleague Jason Smith specifically, in his committee role, as well as others, I think have done an incredible job of exposing the epic corruption of the Biden, Freudian slip, of the Biden crime family. I mean, Joe Biden looked in the eye of the American people in the last debate, and he said that it was a lie, that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, and that neither he nor any member of his family had made a penny from any foreign country. We now know that they took millions from China, from Russia, from Ukraine, from Romania, from the Chinese energy company, specifically. Hunter's very cleverly transferred his multi-million-dollar ownership in the Chinese energy company to one of his attorneys, where presumably he will ultimately get it back. Do you see an appetite developing to move to the next stage, which would be actual articles of impeachment against Joe Biden? And a connected question, as Republicans, perhaps we shouldn't even want that, since this guy, I think, is going to make a fool of himself in a debate coming up in just a few days.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm on the Oversight Committee, and so I've been working with Chairman Comer on the investigation. I've read the suspicious activity reports. every step of the way, as you know, we've been blocked, and they've attempted to block us from getting access to all the information. But in my opinion, there's plenty of information to vote for articles of impeachment. Because look, I mean, and the Bidens have lied multiple times to Congress. So I think that we should hold them in contempt of Congress for lying to Congress. We should be sending those recommendations to Merrick Garland so he can prosecute, and then we need to hold a vote to hold Biden, impeach Biden. But unfortunately, we don't have probably a majority of Republicans that are willing to take that vote, and so the Speaker is left in a difficult situation. Does he put members does he expose those members who don't want to support an impeachment vote? Most of those members are moderate members that the party typically tries to baby, in my opinion, is the best term for it. But they keep them protected and safe from taking difficult votes. But that's the situation, Roger, is that we don't really truly have a majority of patriots. We have a majority on paper, and unfortunately, we don't have the votes to do an impeachment.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Congressman Eric Burleson, represents Missouri in the U.S. House, has very courageously sponsored legislation that would essentially invalidate the findings of the bogus January 6th committee. And we have a little bit more with the congressman, and we'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. We are the crown jewel of talk radio. Thanks for tuning in on this gorgeous Sunday afternoon. You can always check out everything I'm up to at stonezone.com. Don't go away, because coming up is Jeff Clark, who was appointed Assistant Attorney General over two of the Department of Justice's litigating divisions. He is a Trump loyalist, now Director of Litigation for the Center for Renewing America in Washington, D.C. They are trying to destroy Jeff Clark because he zealously represented his beliefs regarding the law. He's going to join us for that conversation. A lot I want to ask him about. Right now, we're with Congressman Eric Burleson of Missouri. He is a courageous freshman. So much for that rule that freshmen should be seen and not heard. Richard Nixon was a freshman congressman when he took on and exposed Russian communist spy Alger Hiss. Had he never done so, well, he'd never have gone to the U.S. Senate. Had he never gone to the U.S. Senate, he'd never become vice president. Had he never become vice president, he would never have become president. And that all happened in a span, folk, of 6 years. Elected to Congress in 1946 and on the ticket for vice president in 1952. Nixon tells a great story of being out of work after he got out of the Navy, going door to door at the blue chip, white shoe law firms in New York. He looked out the window and saw a ticker tape parade in which Dwight Eisenhower drove by. Nixon was then out of work. 6 years later, he would be Dwight Eisenhower's running mate. 4 years in the House, 2 years in the U.S. Senate, and on to the ticket. So the future could be indeed very bright for our guest, Eric Burleson. He has sponsored legislation that would finally challenge the completely false, corrupt narrative put together by the January 6th committee. I learned things today that I didn't know about how the committee was not. I knew it was illegally constituted, although I think that there were court rulings that denied that. But if they have no ranking minority member, the congressman isn't right. They can't, and a minority member must approve a subpoena. Then the subpoenas to Bannon and Peter Navarro and others must indeed be non-valid. Congressman, let me throw you a little bit of a curveball. There's a subgroup of House Republicans who have recommended that we extend the age before one can receive Social Security benefits, and that we examine the income of seniors who are getting benefits so that if they have income beyond Social Security benefits, they would sustain a cut in their benefits, so-called means testing. How do you feel about this proposal?
I'm not a fan of that. I think that as Republicans, we would be converting Social Security from a program that is, it's a forced pension program, forced retirement program, but at least people are supposed to get their money back. It's not exactly the best return on investment, but at least it's a return, and we would turn that into a welfare program. And I would not, as a conservative Republican, would not want to support that. I think we would be foolish to not look at the longevity and the lifespan of individuals and recognize that as future generations, people that are not born today, that Social Security has never made a promise to, that perhaps we ought to peg the retirement rate to life expectancy. And so that if in the future life expectancy, when Social Security, for example, was put in place, I think life expectancy was 60 years old. That was the average lifespan. Today, it's much higher. And so in the future, if life expectancy ends up becoming, say, 90 years old, you've now got a system that was not designed for that. And so I think that we need to own up to the promise that we've made to anyone who's put a dime of money in Social Security. We owe it to them to keep that promise. But I think that we should be thoughtful and explore what mechanism, how we're going to make sure that Social Security is intact for future generations.
Look, you can expect the Democrats to demagogue on this issue in the upcoming election. By the way, Donald Trump will completely and totally 100% any change in the age or cuts in benefits has made that very clear. He would veto it. But the Democrats have nothing to run on, so they're going to run on Trump's a convicted felon. That's already not working. Despite their best efforts, all we have is this show trial in New York, which is an abomination. The government could never show how any of these financial transactions were connected to some underlying crime. Same thing that happened to me. What misstatement to Congress did I make that covered some underlying crime, such as Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration? It's funny how Andrew Weissman goes after me with an axe, but he fails to mention that on November 3rd, 2020, the entire Mueller report was unredacted by court order, and even Mueller, which really means Weissman, had to admit that he had no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or anything else against me, and if he had found it, which he hadn't, certainly couldn't confirm it, it wouldn't have been illegal anyway. So it is the Democrats play by a different set of rules. I also am mindful that our margin in the House is extraordinarily thin. If certain members were to resign, it's now too late to have a special election in most states, not all, but most. Then you would have Speaker Hakeem Jeffries. That's one of the scariest things I can possibly imagine. Anyway, I want to thank Congressman Eric Burlison for joining us. He is a conservative of enormous courage. I think he has been extraordinarily innovative in a way to bring public attention to the illegitimacy of the subpoenas that threaten to send Steve Bannon to jail literally just days from now. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you. It's an honor.
All right, folks, we will be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show. Joining us now is a man who has been tormented by the deep state, perhaps as badly as what they did to General Michael Flynn, what they did to Paul Manafort, what they did to me, what they did to George Papadopoulos, what they are really trying to do to Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Jeff Clark was appointed by President Trump as Assistant Attorney General with oversight of two of DOJ's litigating divisions. He is a Harvard and Georgetown educated attorney. He is also the director of litigation for the Center for Renewing America in Washington, D.C., which is a MAGA think tank. They have sought to disbar and destroy Jeff Clark because he had a different legal opinion of those deep staters above him, such as Attorney General Bill Barr and then Acting Attorney General Rosen. Jeff Clark, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hi, Roger. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I'm honored to have you with us. So, look, nobody can tell this story better than you can. At one point, it was thought that you might be appointed acting attorney general. That didn't happen when there was an uprising in the department. I found it interesting. The argument against you was you hadn't actually been in court. Guess what? Bobby Kennedy was Attorney General of the United States. He'd never been in court, never tried a case in his life, and knew a lot less about the law than you ever knew, Jeff. So start from the beginning for my listeners, and let's unwind why you are being persecuted even today.
Hey, Roger, so two quick corrections. Actually, I was the acting attorney general.
I apologize.
Only for 9 hours.
I see.
Yeah, only for 9 hours.
Wow. That is,
So
I was unaware of that.
Yeah, on January 3rd, in the morning, I was named by President Trump the acting attorney general, and then the uprising you referred to occurred after that, and then that decision was reversed in late the evening of the same day.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, had I taken over, I would have investigated the 2020 election with a lot more energy than those who were in charge of the department before and after.
I apologize and stand corrected. You know, the great Christian prophet Kim Clement, a man who was South African, but who was a prophet, saw many things, actually has a prophecy, which many evangelical Christians tell me is about me, where he says the giant will be taken down by a simple stone, the giant being the deep state. He says, will be taken down by a simple stone. He says, remember that name. Now, I'm a Catholic. I'm a believer. I respect his prophecies because he also predicted the election of a man named Donald. He says that there's a second man, he says, who will save the Constitution, and his name is Clark. So, Jeff Clark, you may indeed be that man.
Well, Roger, I don't know how to react to that. There was another person or two who told me about that statement, and I did see a video on YouTube about that. But I can't focus on that. I think I have to focus on, the situation I'm in, which is a dire one, as you described. They're still trying to strip me of my law license, and they're still prosecuting me down in Georgia. Luckily, down in Georgia, they have stayed that case, the Georgia Intermediate Court of Appeals, because we had filed to disqualify Fani Willis after Judge McAfee's decision allowing her to stay on the case as long as either her or her lover, Nathan Wade, had taken himself off the case. So, of course, Nathan Wade, the inferior picked by Fani Willis as the one who went, leaving her to go forward, which we think is legal error. In fact, tomorrow we're filing a brief on that subject, and then the court is going to hear oral argument in October. So thankfully that case is on ice for a while, but it's not like Fani Willis is giving up on it. I think she's going to have to be removed from that case kicking and screaming, even though we think that that's the legal outcome that's demanded under Georgia law.
Look, I want to make myself clear. I'm not claiming to be a savior or a prophet or certainly a saint. All I'm saying is, Jeff, when I say my rosary at the end of every day, you are among those that I am praying for. His will be done. You have been a real fighter. You have really gone toe-to-toe with the Office of Disciplinary Counsel that is seeking to disbar you. What act is it that they claim merits this treatment?
So they have accused me of two things, Roger. One is that I attempted to lie, which we really can't find any prior bar disciplinary cases using that theory before. And then the second one is that I prejudiced the administration of justice by proposing to send a letter to the Georgia legislature. So on the second one, that one should really be easily dispatched because there are a set of requirements that the D.C. Court of Appeals, the highest local court in D.C. under home rule, has established for that kind of theory, and it requires saying something to a court. And in this instance, I didn't say anything to a court. And indeed, the letter never left the department. It was a draft letter, and it was not presented to any government agency, let alone a court. So back on the theory of attempted lying, the theory basically is trying to make unlawful, make unethical the idea that you disagree with others at the Justice Department. So the theory is that the Justice Department, this disembodied entity, investigated the 2020 election. They found no sufficient fraud, and that's very carefully defined that way, to change the outcome of the election. And therefore, since the draft letter that would have gone to the Georgia legislature had it been approved, indicated that the Justice Department had suspicions about fraud, not just fraud, but irregularities in the 2020 election, meant that I was trying to lie to the people at the department who had done the investigations. It's a theory that doesn't make any sense because they're the ones who had done the investigations. And I'd asked to see the investigations, and the testimony at the trial that wrapped up against me in April, they admitted that they didn't show me the investigative files, and they refused to explain why they would not show me the investigative files. And in recent briefing I argued that, well, that gives rise to an inference that the investigative files didn't show what they purport to have them show. In any event, the letter was a proposal. And so, people, lawyers, other people, they disagree with each other all the time inside the Justice Department. I can tell you that from experience that goes back to 2001 of being at the highest levels of the Justice Department. And we know that the Supreme Court itself, right, has lawyers on it, justices on it who disagree with each other. That's why there are dissents. That's why there are concurrences and other kinds of statements, because reasonable minds can differ. So how can it possibly be unethical to propose something different than your then superiors think? It's not. And it's essentially trying to create a kind of thought crime.
I'm obviously not an attorney. I'm not completely familiar with the Electoral College Act. The mainstream media and the Democrats, partisan prosecutors, have made much of what they kept calling fake electors. But I have read that an alternative slate of electors was filed by John F. Kennedy in Alaska in 1960, and that it was thought on election night that Vice President Richard Nixon had taken the state. Nixon filed his slate of electors on the basis of absentee ballots. John Kennedy ultimately prevailed, and his alternative delegate slate that he had filed became the certified electors for Alaska. So the idea of alternative electors who, in the case of Georgia, I remember reading the minutes where they said, we are taking this action to preserve our rights pending our lawsuit, which I think shows good faith. There's also a case in federal court that, surprisingly enough, a Democrat judge, Judge Totenberg, has been presiding on, which I think really questions some of the fundamental questions over the conclusion that Georgia was won by Joe Biden. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right about both of those things, Roger. And the draft letter to Georgia actually laid out the history of the Nixon-Kennedy election with the alternate electors in Hawaii who ultimately became the actual electors, right? So it's not true that alternate electors are either automatically illegal or that they can never be converted into actual electors. That's all up to, a multi-stage process, right? There's a first thing, people need to understand, right, is that there are usually executive branch authorities inside the states that certify who wins an election, but courts can alter that, right? That's what litigation's about. Second, the Supreme Court has said, going back a long time, that the state legislatures have plenary power over who their electors are. So the state legislatures could reconsider the electors that otherwise emerged from the process. And then third, the January 6th process using the Electoral Count Act in place at the time, and it's a different one than exists now because the January 6th committee pioneered revising that statute. But the one, certainly in effect in 2020 would have allowed Congress to decide whether to certify the electors that were coming from the state. So there are multiple stages where all of this was contested. And so, yes, you're right about that. And you're also right about this still pending litigation in Georgia in federal court in front of Nina Totenberg's sister, Judge Totenberg down there, called Curling v. Raffensperger. It's still pending, and it has an expert witness in it who's a University of Michigan computer scientist, and he specifically, showed the judge that he could hack into these computerized machines in minutes. And indeed, this is something that I don't think I've spoken about a lot, so it'll be new for your program. But in 2019, the D.C. Circuit, right, which many folks often say, even though it's not entirely technically accurate, that it's the second highest court in the nation. The D.C. Circuit sits in D.C. It reviews all sorts of cases about federal administrative agencies. It obviously has jurisdiction over federal crimes committed in the district or other things brought to it. And many of its judges go on to serve as justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. So that court held its annual judicial conference in 2019 out in Cambridge, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore, which I attended at the invitation of the court. And the name of the conference for that year was Cyber Everything. And it brought this professor, Professor Halderman, out. He was on a panel, and he talked about how the electronic machines were not secure. And the judges, lapped that up because the focus in 2019 was looking backward to the 2016 election and the arguments that were being made by our, much vaunted, but I think, highly questionable intelligence community that the Russians had stolen the 2016 election for Donald Trump, right? So it was one thing for the judges to sit in a lecture and hear about electronic voting machine insecurity and hacking and the fact that they don't meet their own standards under federal law. They lapped that up then. But then if you fast forward to 2020 when President Trump and others were questioning use of the machines, then magically, the machines are perfect. So it's quite the contrast. And obviously I knew about that 2019 conference. I knew about Professor Halderman's work because I had attended the conference. And that was one of the things that was in my mind at the time I was working inside the Justice Department and questioning the conclusions others were coming to about the 2020 election.
And that is pending litigation. I have to fully disclose that Nina Totenberg was my next door neighbor when my wife and I lived in Washington. And although we shared no politics, she was a very pleasant lady who loved a good martini. She was married to Floyd Haskell, was the U.S. Senator from the state of Colorado. I don't know much about her sister, the judge, but so far she seems to be handling this case in a very unbiased and orderly manner. It's very, very interesting. What is your opinion of this issue that has been filed with the court in Florida, questioning whether special counsel was constitutionally and legally appointed?
So, Roger, I think that these special counsels are unconstitutional. And I think this goes back to the whole issue of whether independent counsels were constitutional or not. The Supreme Court ruled 8-1 that they were in a case that involved Ted Olson, Morrison v. Olson. And, you know, it's sort of like what's old is new again. So back in the Reagan administration, you know, this ties to Justice Gorsuch, right? Justice Gorsuch's mother, and Burford Gorsuch, is the EPA administrator, and the Democrats really hated her because she was trying to deregulate and bring law and order to EPA. And so John Dingell, the congressman, went after her, and they had fights about what documents to turn over, you know, and we're obviously seeing lots of document fights going on in the current era as well, and we saw them in the Trump administration too. And so ultimately, you know, Ted Olson was in charge when he was the head of OLC of rendering some opinions about, you know, what documents should be turned over, and he refused, and, you know, that led to the appointment of an independent counsel, this woman, Alexia Morrison, and that caused Ted Olson to challenge the constitutionality of the independent counsel, which was set up by statute. There was a lone dissenter in that case, Roger. That was Justice Scalia. And he explained that it is unconstitutional and makes no sense, really, to have a prosecutor who doesn't have a generic multi-defendant, you know, potential defendant docket, but instead is focused on getting one man. You know, that makes the person into an inspector javert. It's not the U.S. system. And he set out all the reasons why it violated the separation of powers. Now, at the time, you know, many thought that, you know, this was just idiosyncratic Scalia. But those of us who love the Constitution always thought that his dissent had the better of the matter. Indeed, I've seen interviews with Justice Kagan, right, who is no, you know, conservative like a Thomas or a Scalia or a Gorsuch or an Alito, saying that, look, you know, that dissent has really stood the test of time. She refused to say that she agreed with it, but she did say it came out a year she was clerking on the court, and that she thought that, you know, that Justice Scalia was crazy at the time, but over time she realized that many of his criticisms directed at the statute were true. And I think the main pivot point for the left on that issue was the fact that Ken Starr was appointed as independent counsel, one of my mentors at my private law firm, Kirkland & Ellis. Sadly, we've lost Ken, but he pursued President Clinton, and once the ox was gored on the other side, that caused you know, a sort of bipartisan groundswell to not re-up that statute because it had a sunset date. So what did the Clinton administration do under Janet Reno and then Neil Katyal, who at later time was an acting Solicitor General? They wrote regulations to try to replicate as near as they could the independent counsel system using regulations that were issued by the Attorney General. And that's our current status quo. We live under that system. So Robert Mueller, Durham, and now Jack Smith were all appointed under the authority of these regulations.
Of course.
Now, I think that...
Jeff, I'm going to stop you there. We're going to go to a quick break. We're talking to Jeff Clark, former acting Attorney General of the United States, and this is the Roger Stone Show. Don't touch that dial, folks. We'll be right back.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back, folks. We're talking to Jeff Clark, former acting Attorney General of the United States under Donald Trump, a man of enormous courage and great legal knowledge, who is really, I think, in the crosshairs of the deep state because they don't want to see Jeff Clark in another Trump administration. So they seek to take away his status as a lawyer at the bar, which would be a national tragedy because this could be a slogan: Jeff Clark did nothing wrong. We were just talking about the challenge that has been filed in the Florida case, where Judge Eileen Cannon has scheduled several days of hearings around the question of whether the special counsel, Jack Smith, was constitutionally appointed and whether the funding of his investigation is constitutional. The argument there, of course, is that he was not ever confirmed by the Senate. Robert Hur was a sitting U.S. attorney. Mr. Weiss, who investigated Joe Biden, a sitting U.S. attorney, both therefore already confirmed by the U.S. Senate. It's interesting. Gary Fineout, good reporter, with Politico, wrote about the challenge mounted in Florida. Other courts have uniformly swept aside similar challenges to the validity of special counsel appointments. Other than the Andrew Miller case, in my case, where Andrew Miller, a young staffer who worked for me, did not want to testify. He filed an objection. The trial judge, Amy Berman Jackson, of course, swept it away. The D.C. Court of Appeals, or the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, affirmed. I think that's called wrongly decided. It never got to the Supreme Court because, well, poor Mr. Miller would have to sit in jail while he waited for that. In the end, the Mueller prosecutors never called him anyway because he had nothing interesting to say regarding Roger Stone or my case. So I think it's interesting the way the left, despite this terrific amicus brief by Ed Meese, a man I've known since 1979, and admire, two very respected law school professors who are not like you and I, conservative Republicans. But the left just kind of wipes this away as being frivolous, ridiculous, absurd. What's your take on that?
Sure. So first, let me say, Ed Meese is great. He's a national treasure, and he actually was one of the witnesses who testified on my behalf about how none of this made any sense under federal law, the effort to go after me in my bar trial. And he's down trying to help President Trump in Florida, along with, as you say, some law professors who are not exactly always Trumpers, let's put it that way, probably quite the opposite, as you say. So, look, I think the legal theory that's been presented is great. First of all, I think the most aggressive theory is that Justice Scalia was right all along, going back to the independent counsel statute, and any attempt to appoint an official at the Justice Department who wields powers, who is not subject to the president's authority and serves, at their pleasure, if they're going to wield principal officer type authority like a special counsel would, is unconstitutional. But even if there's a lesser argument that under which this the special counsels can't constitutionally serve, which is the one that you just pointed out about the fact that Jack Smith is not Senate confirmed. So all of the U.S. attorneys, with some exceptions where there are vacancies and the like, are appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. All of the U.S. attorneys have limited geographic jurisdictions, right? So there's one for the Southern District of Florida, there's one for the Southern District of New York, there's one for D.C., but, they don't go roaming across the entire country. The Attorney General can roam across the entire country, right? But, of course, he's Senate confirmed. So what they did by this regulation is they created a kind of super U.S. attorney, or as I've called it on Twitter, like Shazam, because Shazam combined the powers of like a whole bunch of Greek gods, right? Like he's strong like Hercules and he's fast like, Mercury, et cetera, right? And so this official, Jack Smith, right, he combines all the powers of the U.S. attorneys, and yet he's not Senate confirmed. And under the regulations, he can't be removed by the president, and he cannot be removed by the attorney general except for cause. And I think that that's an unconstitutional system because it takes, someone outside the chain of command back to the president. Now, interestingly enough, after I pointed all this out on Twitter, Lawrence Tribe, the Harvard law professor, suddenly surfaces And he says, well, the regulations are discretionary and they can be eliminated by the attorney general, and then and the president could tell him to eliminate the regulations, and so therefore the whole system is kosher, right? But this is them talking out of both sides of their mouths, Roger, because how often did we hear that Jack Smith is independent? He's independent. When Trump says that Jack Smith's been weaponized to go after Trump and take him out by Joe Biden, that's not correct because he's actually independent of Joe Biden. Okay, but magically now, after I started pointing out how this makes no sense, how Meese and Federal Society affiliated law professors have pointed that out down in Florida, and Judge Cannon's questioning it too. Oh, now magically he's not independent. He actually does trace back to the president. So they realize they have a problem here, Roger, and they can't have their cake and eat it too about it.
That's why I'm convinced that this fabrication, taking things that I said on a illegally recorded video that I say in speeches every week around the country, nothing improper, that Republicans need to use every legal and technical tool necessary to make sure, using my exact words, we have an honest election. And yes, the party lawyer should have access to the courts in case it becomes an emergency. We saw it graphically in the counting center in Detroit, as I said earlier on the show, when Democratic observers had Republican observers physically removed by the Detroit police. Those are the kind of authoritarian tactics that cannot be allowed, but can really, the only relief you could get would be in an emergency appeal to the courts. And then they try to say, because it was my opinion, just because I read the all of the filings in the documents case, and also relied heavily on the terrific reporting of Julie Kelly, that I thought it was possible, maybe even likely, that Judge Cannon was going to dismiss the charges against the president, something I turned out to be incorrect about, because a specific motion was made to do that, kind of proving yet again that I have no particular insights. It's based on my opinion. But to say that I implied that the judge was in Trump's pocket, I said nothing of the kind.
So I saw that, right? I've watched this whole Lauren Windsor thing, and Lauren Windsor's also tried to be a thorn in my side. She showed up outside my workplace one day when me and several of my teammates were headed to lunch, and she fumbled her camera and actually pointed it in the wrong direction and got mocked on Twitter for that. So she was determined to do a better job. She showed up for the first day of my bar trial and then, just tried to ambush me with, silly questions and ones attacking me personally. We just ignored her and got in the car and drove off. But she's a problem. And I saw that, you had said to her that one of the things, in addition to a whole laundry list of options that and tools that have no legal problems whatsoever, that, there had been advanced preparation of getting judge home numbers. Now, the way MSNBC spins that is, well, that's improper. What they're saying is that they have judges in their pockets in advance. Like, no, that's not what you were saying. To any lawyer who, has any modicum of experience, they know that's not what you were saying. And look, for emergency motions and the like, sometimes you're going to find that the court is closed, right? It's closed on evenings. It's closed on the weekends. It's closed on holidays. And if you need immediate relief, sometimes the only way you can try to do it is to track down a judge at home. I can tell you there's a famous case where J. Skelly Wright, a liberal judge of the D.C. Circuit, which I'd mentioned, he was tracked down at home and then, gave emergency relief. I can tell you that when I was clerking, the very first dinner I had with the judge and his wife, along with my co-clerks, back in 1995, the phone rang, and it was a lawyer who had reached my judge, Judge Boggs, to ask him for emergency relief because what was being threatened was a violation of the prior restraint doctrine. Like there was a district court judge who had ordered the press, not to put out a story, which is a serious violation of the First Amendment, right? So, there was nothing nefarious going on. It wasn't like one of the judge's buddies or a political operative or campaign member or something was calling the judge at home to fix something. It was just that's the only way sometimes you can get emergency relief where every minute counts.
That's precisely the point, of course, that I was making. All right, unfortunately, we are out of time. Jeff Clark, a great patriotic American, former acting attorney general of the United States. Jeff, your legal bills have to be astronomical. Where can folks go if they want to help you?
Oh, thank you, Roger. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your prayers as well, you telling me about that, and my family appreciates it. So I have a Give, Send, Go set up at www.givesendgo.com/Jeff Clark, just JEFFCLARK.
All right, many thanks, Jeff Clark. Thank you for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. Folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
It's The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back, folks. This is The Roger Stone Show. So a man walks into a bookstore and he says, hey, I want to buy Donald Trump's new book on immigration. And the bookstore proprietor says, get the hell out of here. The guy says, yeah, that's the name of it. I heard that at the Turning Point USA conference in Detroit. Amazing speeches by President Donald Trump and many, many others. And it was there that I said that I had buried the hatchet with Steve Bannon. I really do think that there are serious constitutional issues involved in his current fighting of the House subpoena. I would have recommended that he assert his Fifth Amendment rights as I did, but he chose to go a different route. There are serious executive privilege issues in his case. So I call for justice in that case. Joining me now is a man who is a legal pugilist. He is a brawler. If you're a client or an American and you want a lawyer who will fight for you, a man of enormous courage, and that is why my good friend Joe McBride now joins us on the Roger Stone Show.
Hey, Roger, how you doing?
I am very honored to have you, my friend. There's so much going on that I want to get your opinion on, but very recently you texted me and you asked me to send you a list of the biographies of former President Richard Nixon, our 37th president, that I recommended. And I sent you a short list, a great book by Conrad Black, which may be one of the definitive biographies. But, of course, there's Richard Nixon's own memoirs, plus his earlier book, Six Crises, which you said made quite an impact on you. So what is your assessment of the president that whose detractors used to call him Tricky Dick?
I think that he was a brilliant guy. I was very surprised to learn about the similarities between what happened to President Nixon and what's happening to President Trump. Look, lots of these things happened before I was born. I was born in 1978. I remembered him growing up, but I really didn't understand the gravity of the things that took place. And as I began to listen to people like you and Monica Crowley talk about him, I started digging into the situation and digging into the life. And I was astounded by the similarities. I was astounded by how much good he wanted to do for this country and the vicious attack that he came under by the deep state because of it. And the similarities of what's happening with you, what's happening with Bannon, what happened with G. Gordon Liddy, Richard Nixon, Donald Trump. It's all the same. It's the same playbook over and over again. And most people don't know it. I didn't know it. I'm learning about it. And I think that the general public, members of my generation, Generation X, and people younger than me need to understand what took place so we can understand what they're going to do next and what the roadmap is going forward.
Joe, what you say is absolutely true. First of all, Nixon's incredible record gets buried in the ashes of Watergate. I mean, he gets us a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets. He ended the war in Vietnam on a much faster timetable than the Pentagon wanted it. He did away with the military draft. We went to an all-volunteer army. He gave us the 18-year-old vote. If you're old enough to die for your country, you should be old enough to vote. He gave us the Environmental Protection Agency. I think he would roll in his grave if he saw how overregulated we are. But at the time, there were no regulations, and there are wealthy people willing to despoil our air and our water and our soil to make a buck. Regulations gone too far in the other direction pushed by big government, but the initial concept in the spirit of Theodore Roosevelt, the great conservationist, is a huge accomplishment. He is also the president who desegregated the schools. Overwhelming, I think 86% of the schools in the country were still segregated when he became president. By the time he left, that had dropped to the teens, without violence, without bloodshed. He's also the president who gave us affirmative action, something many of my conservative friends strongly disagree with, but recognizing the past injustices against black Americans. He set up the Office of Minority Business Investment, making low interest loans through his program Black Capitalism, which interestingly enough is very similar to President Donald Trump's Platinum program, which I think will have enormous impact in the urban communities. I'm glad you particularly like Six Crises. Six Crises was Nixon's first book. He wrote it after being defeated in the 1960 election. It's the first year in his life he ever made any real money. It was from the book. The Kennedy administration would have Nixon audited that year and for the next 3 years, speaking of the abuse of power.
Indeed, Roger. You know, I thought that, especially in the Six Crises, the way that he talked about his defeat, what he learned from it, those experiences, and how he forged a way forward and eventually became the president of the United States was absolutely fantastic. And I was taken back by how, I don't know, down to earth and humble he is and was in his writing. I really connected for a bit because I believe in life, especially as a trial attorney and as a man in this country and in this world. You learn by your experiences. It's not about how many times you fall down. It's about how many times you get back up and your willingness to persist until you achieve your goal. I share that in common with him. I know that you do. I know that President Trump does. And that is a part of the spirit and the ethos of this country that is lost on many of us. And you just gave this beautiful litany of President Nixon's accomplishments. And President Trump has a lot of them as well. And it seems like the deep state and Washington politicians in the swamp as a whole doesn't really like it when a candidate actually runs on something and then delivers on his promises for the American people. They much rather have somebody who will deliver on their backroom promises to the people in Washington, D.C. And that's why we need Donald Trump back in office.
You asked me the other day about G. Gordon Liddy. G. Gordon Liddy, of course, was one of the Watergate burglars. He was the ringleader of the Watergate burglars. He was a former FBI agent. I actually worked on Gordon Liddy's 1968 campaign for Congress. It's a very interesting development here because the man who brought G. Gordon Liddy to Washington, D.C. would later become president of the United States because of Liddy's actions. It is a little-known fact that in 1968, a former Deputy Assistant Duchess Attorney G. Gordon Liddy challenged Hamilton Fish of the Fish political dynasty for a congressional seat in the Republican primary in the mid-Hudson Valley. I lived in the northern tip of Westchester, and I volunteered for that campaign. Fish won the Republican primary, but Liddy had the Conservative Party nomination. There was a hard-charging challenge from a very wealthy Democrat named John Dyson, and party chiefs really feared that because Liddy would siphon conservative votes or Republican votes from Hamilton Fish, who, shall we say, was not the most charismatic candidate you ever met, kind of example of what happens when you marry your own cousin for the enough centuries. So they went to House Minority Leader Gerald Ford. Ford, in order to get Liddy, it was too late to get his name off the ballot, but in order to get Liddy to stop campaigning, then was able to secure a job during the Nixon administration at the Treasury Department for G. Gordon Liddy. It wasn't very long before Liddy got in trouble there because he was an avid Second Amendment proponent, and he was making speeches critical of the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. But then he was discovered by a man named John Dean. It was John Dean who recruited Gordon Liddy. It was John Dean who pushed him to prepare a campaign intelligence gathering operation known later as Gemstone. It was Liddy who I think was taken in by the other members of the Berkeley team, all of them reporting to the CIA. Gordon Liddy was not an experienced FBI agent. I think he was putty in the hands of E. Howard Hunt and Bernard Barker and Eugenio Martinez and other of the Watergate burglars who were still on the payroll of the CIA. You see, the CIA knew about the Watergate break-in well in advance. In any event, Gordon Liddy causes the break-in of the Watergate. Watergate ultimately, after a long, epic fight over the executive privilege regarding Nixon's tape, brings Nixon down, and Gerald Ford becomes president. So in essence, when Ford got Liddy a job, he began the most unlikely sequence of events in American political history.
You know, Roger,
Liddy's
it
book,
reminds me a lot.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Roger. I was just going to say you're talking about the stuff that happened at Watergate and the op that took place behind it, the chess pieces that were moved around on the board. And without getting, too tinfoily hat here, there's just a lot of similarities between Watergate and Richard Nixon and January 6th and Donald Trump. There are a lot of things that happened on January 6th that everybody, with eyes to see and ears to hear, knew that they were going to happen in advance. They let it happen anyway. The objective of the protest was to encourage members of Congress not to certify. People had a right to go down there and talk about it. Things got out of hand when they shouldn't have, and who lost? Donald Trump lost. Not only did the certification happen, he gets dragged under the bus and is still being dragged under the bus and prosecuted for this, along with countless of other American citizens because of what happened that day. So for me, in my heart and in my mind, when I juxtapose these two events in time next to each other, I look at Watergate, I look at January 6th, I look at Richard Nixon, I look at Donald Trump, I see a lot of the same things.
Well, it's certainly true in the case of Watergate. I mean, we now have declassified documents just within the last year that show the Watergate prosecutors, Nick Ackerman, Jill Wine-Volner, both knew of the CIA's involvement in the Watergate break-in, but neither one of them did anything whatsoever about it. Tucker Carlson's done a number of great segments on this. So the Central Intelligence Agency, which I have previously identified as a central player in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, also took down Richard Nixon in a silent coup for the same reason. Nixon says in his memoirs he was going to reform the national security apparatus and our intelligence agency to take power away from unelected bureaucrats. He had a deep distrust of the Central Intelligence Agency because first of all, they had shared the existence of the secret Bay of Pigs plan with candidate John F. Kennedy before the debates. Kennedy used it to torture Nixon on the debate stage, saying that the Eisenhower-Nixon administration wasn't tough enough on Cuba. And of course, Nixon could not respond because he would be blowing the cover of a highly confidential government op that he was overseeing, later approved by John Kennedy himself to his great, regret. Folks, if you just tuned in, we're talking to my good friend Joe McBride. He is a criminal defense lawyer. He's a noted attorney. He is an absolute fighter. When we come back, I want to focus on the January 6th investigation, and he's represented a number of January 6 victims. We're going to talk about that. So, folks, you remember, you can hear us anytime at WABCRadio.com, online, anytime, around the world, worldwide. But if you get the 77 WABC radio app, well, then you can go back later and listen to the shows you miss. Shows like Sid Rosenberg, shows like Larry Kudlow, shows like Curtis Sliwak, shows like my good friends Frank Morano, and of course, not to mention Dominic Carter. So you want to get that 77 WABC radio app. Don't touch the dial. We'll be right back with Joe McBride.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. I am so proud to be a part of the 77 WABC radio family. This is the radio station I grew up listening to, driving my 1965 Volkswagen to and from John Jay High School and listening to Cousin Brucey. John Jay High School right there in Katona, New York. So I'm so honored to be in the family. And the dynamic lineup here on 77 WABC just really cannot be beat. So, folks, download that 77 WABC app to your cell phone and do it now. Okay, we're talking to Joe McBride. Joe has represented a number of victims, I would say, of the January 6th controversy. Joe, quick question, I guess a good place to start, is what do you believe happened on that day?
Well, I believe that on January 6th, well, it's a loaded question and it's a tough question. I believe it was the biggest entrapment operation that the world has ever seen. I don't say that because I have a political alignment one way or another. I say that as an attorney who has examined evidence for the past 4 years and whose theories have been systematically confirmed through the sharing of evidence with other attorneys, through the sharing of evidence with the general public, and through the acquisition of evidence that the Department of Justice that has refused to turn over to us to be able to look at the situation and say, hey, there were think about this, Roger. On January 6th, President Trump asked people to walk peacefully down to the Capitol. On the way down to the Capitol on Constitution in Pennsylvania, there were parade routes that were cornered off. There were no cars on the road. Any reasonable person would look at that and say that we have been granted permission to walk from the ellipse down to the Capitol and gather peacefully. And then when people get down to the Capitol grounds, the fences have been removed. Don't walk here, don't trespass here signs have been removed. They push up against the Capitol walls, and the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police start to rain down hellfire on them in terms of crowd control munitions that are not supposed to be used in any situation like the situation on January 6th. People were burned. People were shot in the face with rubber bullets. People were maced. People were beaten. And peaceful, cheering protesters went from singing God Bless America and singing in the Our Father and singing How Great Thou Art and singing This Is Our Country and whatever it is to having to defend themselves. And a fight broke out. That should have never happened. But the people who went there that day relied on the D.C. government's representation, which says, hey, you can walk down this parade route, you can go there, and you can go in peace, and everything will be okay. And when they got down there, they got attacked, and fights broke out all over the place. That was completely unavoidable, completely foreseeable. It should have never happened. And you have to ask yourself, how do 500 and 600 men get assault charges against federal officers who have never had a parking ticket in their life? And the question is very easy to answer. Good men do not sit by and do anything when elderly people, the infirmed, and women are getting the crap kicked out of them in front of them. They say, hey, officer, you don't do that. Hey, officer, don't hit my wife. Don't hit that person. They can't defend themselves. And then they get involved. And that's what happened that day. And all of those men who acted in defense of themselves and defense of others got rung up and are facing 20 and 30 years in jail. Now, most people aren't getting that time, but they're still getting 5, 6, 7, 8, in some cases 22 years of their life taken from them, and that's wrong. Now, everybody who went to the Capitol wasn't an angel, but when you juxtapose January 6th with the BLM and Antifa protests that happened, we know that stuff got lit on fire, cops got pushed, things got broken, and in none of those cases did any of those people get any serious jail time. So why is it that every single person who was a target of a DOJ investigation had their doors kicked in by the FBI like they were Osama bin Laden, have to facing decades of years in jail, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills? And the answer is simple. They did it to chill free speech. They did it to send a message from one political party to the other that if you come, that if you gather, that if you protest, and if you display a show of force, we will kick down your door and drag you into jail.
Very, very succinct and very moving. Joe, you've had clients there. What are the conditions like in the D.C. gulag?
So the first 3 years, the conditions were really, really bad. The conditions aren't as bad in that particular facility anymore because we have fought very hard to change them. But it's not just the D.C. jail. There's what's considered like a gulag archipelago. There's all these other jails that are affiliated that the Department of Justice will send people out to pre-trial and hold them there for, it seems like, in perpetuity until these cases are called. Some of these cases take 3 years to go to trial. And you have a Fifth Amendment due process right. As a United States citizen, you are innocent until proven guilty. And you can only be punished for a crime after you've been convicted in court. Despite that reality, these men have been starved, beaten, held in solitary confinement for months and months and months at a time. Many of these guys are military veterans with PTSD, or they're older people who have serious medical and health issues, and they've been tortured. When you have diabetes, when you have a lung problem, when you have a heart condition, when you have any regular condition that takes medical care and a specific diet to manage well in the world, and then you're thrown into a jail pre-trial, and they refuse to even acknowledge that you have the condition, and then they feed you food that poisons your body and makes your diabetes go out of control, makes your heart rate go out of control, causes your cancer to grow. They're knowingly doing that to these people because they simply don't view them as human. And this is a very, very big problem. And I wish I could say that there was a reasonable solution for it, but there's really no solution for it. Because when I get up there and I give these very impassioned arguments and I lay out all the evidence for these judges, look at what has happened to these people. 8 months in solitary confinement, 9 months you got cancer, no medical care, whatever it is, they don't care. And that's the scary thing about January 6th. You have this erosion of our freedoms that happened with the Kennedy assassination, and then we talked about what happened with Nixon. You have all these different attacks, but that has usually been, one intelligence agency versus another, or people in government who are going back and forth to jostle for power. But this is the first time in the history of our great republic that the American people are being targeted for their political beliefs, and the judges in D.C. court aren't doing anything about it. And Roger, there's really no good answer about it.
Joe, I'm sorry I got to stop you there. I want to thank you for coming to the Roger Stone Show. Folks, hold on, because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be right along with Sundays with Sinatra.